From September 23rd through the 25th, 2022, our church community gathered for our second annual Vision Weekend. It's a time we've set aside every year to look at the past year, look at the things that have happened, the things we've accomplished, look at our hopes and dreams, and also to look at where we're going together. This year's theme was a place to belong, believe, and become, in that order. So these are recordings from those sessions. I hope they're helpful to you. If you were there in person, I hope they're a refresher to some of the things that we talked about. If you couldn't be there in person, I hope they are helpful to you. Of course, it's always better in person in the moment, but hopefully these recordings you'll be able to hear and kind of track along with the conversation we started having. Of course, the goal is that over the course of the next year, we're going to continue these conversations and continue working out some of the things that, some of the ideas we put out there during the weekend. So I hope they're helpful to you. God bless.
Here's the first session here is just a look back at last year. So we gathered like this for the first time last year. And there was a couple different things we did beforehand. All the committees did some. John, there's some room up here if you want. Okay. What's that? I agree. We talked about all the committees did some work, and we said, hey, what are our committees? That was a learning experience for me. There were some committees that were operational that I had no idea existed. We asked, what is it that we do? What have we been doing? What do we like to be doing? And then we presented those. That was really informative, I think, for everybody, actually. That we heard what each other's doing, and I got an idea. What came from that is a handbook that Carol and I are piecing together, and the goal is to have it done by the end of this year, so we're ready for the next round of nominations and that kind of thing. So that was great and informative, but we spent the majority of our time asking 3 questions, and in 3 different sessions. We asked, why are we here and what does it matter? What makes us who we are? And then we said, if you stepped into a time machine and went 10 years into the future, what would you hope to see? Do you remember those conversations for those of us who were here? It was really nice. It was great to hear each other and to listen. And then we asked a bonus question at the end that we didn't really have time to get at. But what do we have to do to get there? That's the thread that we're picking up on today. That last question, what do we have to do to get there? And that's what we're going to be talking about. But I want to put a couple questions to the room here. Not per table, we're just going to say it out loud together. The first is, what are some things in our church that you've seen over the last year that excite or encourage you? Let's start there first. Who wants to take a stab at that question? Yeah, Doug?
Fuller pews.
Fuller pews. Yeah. Saw a hand. What's that? New families. Yeah.
Yeah.
What's that?
Young
families. Yeah. What else? Dina, you said something?
Well, with that comes more youth in our program.
More youth. Yeah. Yeah. Those front pews on Sunday morning are getting fuller and fuller. Yeah. What else? Yeah.
And with that, more energy.
More energy. Yeah. Yeah. The one that goes down with the kids every Sunday says that's a lot of energy. Yeah. It's true. Yeah.
More community outreach with the listen suppers.
Yeah. Community outreach and listen. Yeah, that's great. Anything else excites, encourages you? All right. What are some things then? Sorry, that's supposed to be what hopes, not where hopes. What hopes do you have as we move forward? So here we are. We've come a year. We've got another 100 to go. But what are some hopes that you want? That maybe there's some things over the last year that expectations that you had that haven't been fulfilled yet, or things that you're still hoping to see as we move forward. What would some of those be? Yeah, Susan.
Yes, I would love to see, dear trustees, a handrail on the other side of the stairs going down, so it's easier
On both
sides.
of the stage or the?
No, going downstairs to the downstairs. Right?
Oh, okay.
Sometimes these are full.
Yeah.
And you can't always wait if you're an old lady. And the other thing is the entrance coming up,
Yeah,
that first one, it needs to have more fill, I don't know what, because I'm not an engineer or construction. So it's level from a gradual, from the parking lot.
Yeah.
So if you've got a wheelchair or a walker, you can get up smoothly.
Yeah.
And then there's a crack in this sidewalk and a threshold. And people might think those are picky things, they can be navigated, but our friend that we bring,
Yeah.
she's a tough woman, she'll be 89
yeah,
next month.
Oh, wow.
And she's just,
yeah.
I don't know if I would have done as well when I was
Yeah.
in the walker.
No, that's great.
That's my,
That's great. You went right for the practical, like we could do this. Yeah, I love it. I love it. We've got a few trustees here this morning that I think heard you, so we're good. What else? What are some other hopes and expectations or dreams that you have for us as we move forward? Yeah,
I think intergenerational conversation and dialogue.
yeah, yeah,
So we talked about increasing youth, and I think Amelia and my kids are part of that and bringing more in, but the interaction across generations is fantastic, I think, on all fronts. So,
yeah. Are you thinking more in specific types of conversations or just across the board?
Just even last night with the music, I mean, music was a venue, a forum for it, but I think there's so much to learn in both directions.
Yeah,
In all regards.
yeah, it's great.
So, Dan, you triggered something in me, in a good way. I would really, and this is no surprise, I would really like to see broader and deeper opportunities for Bible study. I think people, you look at the Bible study that we do here, and it's great, but it's really just, it's kind of a core of people that have been doing, mostly that have been doing these things for a long time. And I think there's a threshold that people sense about either the difficulty or maybe the formalism of Bible study that keeps them away.
or
I
the
would-
timing.
Oh,
Good timing.
or the timing,
Yeah.
yes, don't
Wednesday
get me
morning at
started.
10 a.m. doesn't work for everybody.
Which is terrible for me, by the way.
Yeah.
I'm freaking retired, and it's the one day, it's not good.
That you're busy, yeah.
I would love to see multiple opportunities. Intergenerational would be great, because I think that both sides have something to say to the other side, not to make this, sided, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Let's say. And the other thing, I've already been on this soapbox once this morning. I believe really, really firmly, and I think this church believes in the priesthood of all believers, and you don't have to have, a lot of credentials behind your name to catalyze, to facilitate a Bible study. All you have to do is have an interest and a willingness to do it.
Yeah,
I'll join yours, Mark.
yeah,
Yeah,
there you
yeah,
go.
Listen, I volunteered, everybody that stood up there, I've said, hey, if you want somebody else to run one, I'd be happy to.
All right.
Not Wednesday morning.
Not Wednesday morning.
So,
The idea of
yeah,
the intergenerational thing,
Yeah.
You can bring your granddaughter, you can bring your child, I think that would be cool.
yeah, yeah, totally, yeah.
I didn't hear what Dina said.
Go ahead, say it again, Dina.
I said intergenerational one, I can bring my granddaughter, you can bring your grandchildren, children, or child, just have a special time with them while you're both learning.
Yeah. Could someone pull those kitchen doors closed? The fan, or the fan off, yeah, whichever's better, thank you. And 4 people got up to take care of it. That's our church, isn't it? That's just our church. Yeah. It's recording, yeah, we are recording it, yeah. Yeah, you're not all in video, but your voices are heard, so watch what you say. No, Marjorie?
So I would like to see, building on Dan and Mark's comments, I would like to see more of the generations involved in worship, actively involved in worship, not just the children's moment, but to have the kids involved
Yeah,
in worship, and having more of us involved in worship rather than the usual.
what do you mean by worship?
I mean, sort of the Sunday morning service.
Music, leading?
Music, I'd say reading, we occasionally have kids read, but
Mhm.
maybe more actively. In the prayers and things like that, it doesn't have to be the Chris show. I'd like to see
Amen,
more
hallelujah.
people. I love you, but I actually think it would be wonderful, just hearing, like the supply preachers in summer, we have so much, talent and, I just
Yeah.
like to see more of us, so it's,
Yeah,
it's all of us involved in that.
yeah, I love it. Maxine?
Maybe some of the younger ones too, handing out the bulletins or picking them up.
So you know what, let me say, to kind of jump on that, what we're planning on starting, are we going to start this month or in October?
In October.
Do you want to say it?
You can say it.
At first it was an answer to a space issue, limited space issue downstairs when it comes when all the kids are together. But we said, no, it's actually a good opportunity that the middle schoolers and older, once a month, are going to stay in the service. And that's the Sunday to include them in things like reading the scriptures, even the ones that get read normally after the kids all go downstairs, greeting at the door, running Zoom, things like that. So that's definitely an opportunity. Yeah, John?
I've always seen a sparseness of opportunity for spiritual growth here, partly due to the odd selection of participatory time as 1 hour on Sunday.
Yeah.
Every other church I've ever been part of has 2 hours on Sunday. There's a Bible study hour where there are classes that people can participate in.
Yeah. Before or after the service. Yeah.
Before or after. And then there's a formal church service. And I would like us to consider doing that. Because I think we take the trouble to get here on Sunday morning. So there's the opportunity. We have the space, we have the desire. Why not continue our Christian education during an hour that's dedicated to that, that's separate from the formal church service?
I like that. I like that.
Well, those of us with a long commute would say that adds value. It's a Yankee thing, you know, it's better to, if I'm driving up here, I'd rather have 2 things to do than just one.
Yeah. Don't worry, Mark. We can think of some things for you to do.
Usually I just eat donuts.
Yeah. I think that's great. Yeah, Jim?
Well, you know, talking about forms of worship and how to get kids more involved. One of our most important forms of worship is missions, right? What we do out in the community, and doing more hands-on mission work with the kids, I think would really have a huge impact. Really living our faith out there in the community,
Yeah.
I think would be important.
Yeah.
But aren't the kids doing it like once a month now?
So they are with Marjorie and Robin Henry. They're doing, usually it's the last Sunday of every month. They do, well, Marjorie, why don't you say?
It's, they're called Service Sundays.
Yeah.
And we actually do projects that are like local missions, local outreach. Making cookies for the listen dinners, making cards for shut-ins. We've done stuff for the Ukraine mission.
Actually, I think right now, Dan, am I right, is Amelia downstairs with them right now, doing Christmas cards?
For Puerto Rico, yeah.
So they're, the kids are downstairs now, well, or at some
Maybe we
point
need
this
more of
morning.
this for adults.
Yeah.
I'll talk to you.
Yeah.
I think that's a perfect opportunity to expand on the intergenerational piece, though.
Yeah. Let me just give this as a caveat. We're the kind of church that if you say something, we're probably going to do it. So be careful what you say too, or we'll volunteer you. Ed, you've been wanting to say something?
I thought a good community or church bonding experience would be an annual work day for painting, cleaning up.
Putting up railing.
And we've done that in the past.
Yeah. I think the trustees just got religion again. Woo!
Now that
Annual work
John
day.
are getting up there.
Believe me, I feel it.
Yeah. Abby, you want to say something?
Back on kids and missions, one other thing the missions committee has done is had a lot of our missionaries make videos for the kids so that they're aware of all of the ministries and missions that the church supports, and they can learn about that during the Sunday school time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Catherine really enjoyed the woman that came and spoke downstairs to all the kids.
Yeah.
On the way home, she just told me all about it.
Yeah. Oh, that's great.
It was really good.
That's great. Yeah, Mark?
I'm sorry, I have to get on another soapbox, and again, I hope not in a bad way. I think that, and I think this has been true for a long time, and I think it's really reaching sort of a peak. Our thoughts of missions, the fact is that what we used to consider spiritually, I think the developing world is way ahead of us in terms of its ability to catalyze growth in Christianity. I think, you know, the backyard is the big mission in 2022. CE, I'm going to say CE for obvious reasons. You know, the world is full of people who are if not hostile, indifferent, which is actually even worse, to Christianity, and, you know, they're our neighbors in many cases.
Mm.
And those are the opportunities for mission, and they don't cost much.
Yeah, yeah.
And they're logistically easier too. So
Yeah.
again, with all due respect to ongoing missions around the world, which are important, you know, if they thrive and we die, that's a pretty bad outcome.
Yeah, yeah, it's good. I saw a couple more hands, I thought. Hopes, dreams for the future? No? All right, I mean, we hit some pretty key areas there. And every area that you guys just mentioned is very actionable. Like what's stopping us from doing it except our own investment, right? I think a Bible study, whether that's through the week or on Sunday morning, very easy to step into, getting kids involved. These aren't things that are really far in the future. Anything else that in those two categories there that you want to add? No? What? Hey, Doug, hey.
Let me turn the tables.
Yep.
What have you not been able to achieve in your first year of the
Don't do that.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I don't. I honestly can't. I can't really, at the moment, I can't think of anything. I think personally, I think it's been over a year and a half since I came. I think a lot has happened in the year and a half. I think we've made some really significant strides forward in areas that I didn't really have to push too hard on. It was stuff it's nice to be in the position where I can facilitate things that people want to do anyway. So I've appreciated that. Yeah, I can't think. Is there something that you would anticipate that I didn't answer that question?
Well, I think you came in with a vision,
Mm-hmm.
and I was just wondering how well you think you realized that vision, or whether we're going in a different way, or what. I mean, obviously, it's a two-way street.
Yeah. So when it comes to vision and churches and moving forward, my personal philosophy is that vision is something the church has to create together. I didn't start that way. When I started out, I thought, oh, here's my vision, let's get everybody excited about it. And the way that's changed for me is I thought, well, if I do that, then I'm constantly trying to convince people of how great my idea is. And that just doesn't work. And we all love vision more that comes from us. And that's been the only successful way of moving forward that I've found. So for me, there might be, if I really thought about it, there might be some specific things that I really want to accomplish. Well, everything you all are saying is stuff that's on my heart too. In my mind, I'd love for all of those things to happen. I think our worship services becoming more and more intergenerational is a goal we all have. It's one I share. To me, that feels pretty top priority. Because we have so many new people coming in, and how do we integrate all that? A strong presence in the community. Those would be some big areas, but no really specific ideas. Yeah. I'm kind of, I don't know. I'm making it up as I go.
It's a very good answer.
Yeah. Thanks for the question. Okay, I got to be on my toes. I'm putting you guys on your toes. I got to be on my toes too.
Rephrase that, following the lead of the Holy Spirit.
What did I say that needs rephrasing?
Making it up as I go.
Making it up as I go. Follow. Yeah, exactly. Yes, thank you. Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's what any of us do. I was praying that yesterday before we headed up to Hanover Center. My God, my prayer for this whole weekend is that we just kind of discover your plans for your church. We can have our plans. I mean, that's all over Scripture, right? I forget the one in Proverbs, but there's a way that seems right unto a man, but something is in the hand of the Lord. His times are in the hands of the Lord, something like that. The end thereof is?
The ways of death.
The ways of death. Okay, that's yeah. Yep. Man makes his plans, but
there's a motto.
The Lord, yeah.
Well, I mean, not to be too heavy, but I see it around me all day
Yeah.
right here.
Yeah.
It's a very spiritually dark place that we live in.
Yeah.
And we are a light. We're supposed to be holding up the light of God's hope and truth.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And
And as a society, we treat the outcomes, but we don't treat the causes. Here in this church, we have a way to actually address the causes because of God's grace to us.
yeah.
We can go right to the root of it. That's what I see as our mission.
Yeah. 100%. I'm really
Sorry to bring heaviness.
No. You're teeing off some stuff that we're about to head into. Yeah. Yeah. We have a really unique opportunity here. Let's jump into our next session here. The theme of the whole this whole weekend: belong, believe, become. I want to tell you the story of where this phrase comes from. You're familiar with St. Patrick's Day, right? I'll wear green or get pinched. I don't know where that came from, but St. Patrick, though, was quite a revolutionary figure. Let me tell you a little story, and then it's going to lead into some discussion. So Patrick was born in Britain. He was taken as a slave and brought over to Ireland, where as a kid into his early teenage years, he was a slave on a farmland for this one guy. It was there that he found, or the faith that he had gained or had been sown into his life as a child. He developed that. He escaped, goes back to Great Britain, and as he's there, he starts training to become a priest. And somewhere in the course of his training, he feels the Lord calling him to go back to Ireland to reach the people that were previously his captors. And so he goes. He knew he could speak Gaelic at that point. He was familiar with the culture. He's like, okay, I'm going to go. Now there was only one church at this time, and it was heavily influenced by Rome. And Rome, when they sent out missionaries, they had a particular way of going about it, especially when they were going to barbarian cultures. Sometimes that meant they were illiterate. Sometimes it just meant they did not do things the Roman way. So they had this way of doing it that first we need to civilize them, and then we can Christianize them. We can teach them to behave like we think they should, and then we can teach them the faith. And so you could say it this way, that they would teach them first to behave, and then to believe, and then they could belong. They could be a part of Christian community. Now, when Patrick went to Ireland, he knew these people, he knew the language, he knew the culture. He was able to communicate to them, not only in their language as in Gaelic, but also in the way of speaking, in the way they thought. The Celtic peoples were always very imaginative. They loved telling stories. There was a lot of folk religion where spiritual signs, or they would read things as spiritual signs. And Patrick was able to pick up on that. But he did something unique. He raised up a group of people. He brought some with him and then raised them up there. And this is how he went about his mission, okay? He'd go to a village or a tribe, a city, and he'd go to speak to either the king or the tribal leader, ask for permission to be there and to talk with people. When he would get it, they would set up a camp just outside the city. And they'd build homes, they'd build a chapel, they'd garden, they would just set up a whole way of independent life. And then during the day, they would go into this village and they would just spend time in the village trying to engage in something they would call the ministry of conversation. So they weren't standing on corners preaching and proselytizing or evangelizing is how maybe that comes to mind. They would be trying to get into conversation, to talk about the hope and life of Jesus. They saw the world and specifically Ireland, as desperately in need of the life and hope of the gospel of Jesus. Mind you, those people were just fine not knowing anything about it, but they understood God loves all people, and this is a message for all people, so they would do that. And then as people began to be receptive, you know how you can talk to somebody and somebody feels like it feels like they want to know more? they'd get receptive, then they would invite them back into this community of faith that they had set up. Now, you might think that might sound like a monastery, except the monasteries coming out of Rome up until that point were way off in the mountains or in the hills somewhere, and it was an escape from the world. Patrick, revolutionary, he said, no, the community of faith should be adjacent to the people that we're trying to reach, and we should invite people to become a part of this community. So they would go, as they were talking, they were getting into conversation, they were praying for people. They would pray that the sick would be healed. They would encounter people that they would even identify as demon-possessed, just like they read in the New Testament. And they would pray for them to be free. They would even mediate conflicts. And in response, those who were receptive, they would extend an invitation. You want to know more? Come and see what this life actually looks like. Let me read you a quote from a guy. His name's George Hunter. He talks about this. What would happen when these people would come back into this village, this community of faith? He says, put yourself in the place of a seeker, a refugee, an abused teenager, anyone who has been invited to visit this community of faith, and now you've found your way there. What would you likely experience? You would meet a porter stationed near that community's entrance whose main role was to welcome guests and introduce them to the rest of the community. The abbot, the one in charge, and everyone else would welcome you with all courtesy and love. That's a quote from their own writings. They would gently inquire about what prompted your visit, and that would begin the ministry of conversation. They'd read a scripture for you, offer a prayer for you, extend the kiss of peace. They would wash your feet because you walked there by foot, and would show you to the guest house, which would be managed by a caring brother who would give you bedding. You would be included at the head table at meals. If the abbot was in a period of fasting, he would break that fast because the abbot had no higher priority than ministry with guests. You would learn that this community's highest commitment is hospitality to strangers, seekers, pilgrims, and refugees. They followed the Benedictine rule that's 53 that says all guests who present themselves are to be welcomed as Christ himself. For he himself will say one day, and this is from Matthew, I was a stranger and you welcomed me. Soon you would be given what was called an anum carne, or a soul friend. You would be given a small group, think of a Bible study, and a place for periods of solitude. You would learn some scriptures. You would worship with the community. One or more persons would share the ministry of conversation and pray with you daily. And after some days or weeks, you would find yourself believing what these Christians believe, and they would invite you to commit your life to Christ and his will for your life. There was a book that came out at the end of the 90s called How the Irish Saved Civilization. It's a historical book. It's non-religious. The guy who wrote it is a non-religious historian, but he attributes the saving of Western civilization to Patrick's work among the peoples because of how they did end up teaching people how to read and write and mediating conflicts and all of that. Won't go into that. But it was so radical how Patrick went about this. And then what they would do, they would establish that in one place, and then they'd get a group of from that place and send them out as a team into another place to replicate what they just did. This was a church planting strategy. But I just want to hold these two things in contrast together. Here's the Roman model on the left and the Celtic model, or Patrick's model on the right. The Roman model, and I would argue, and none of these thoughts are original to me, I'm just presenting them to you. The Roman model is the way that we often think about how our faith is communicated today and spread today. First, there's a presentation. This is the truth you should believe. The decision, do you believe it, yes or no? Fellowship, and now you can become a part of our community. Patrick and his group of people flipped it on its head because they saw a different pattern in Jesus. They saw Jesus not saying, hey, believe, and then we'll go eat together. He said, hey, Zacchaeus, you stealing tax collector, I'm coming to your house for dinner today. The Pharisees, and we'll talk about this tomorrow, the Pharisees did not like Jesus because they said, look, he's sitting with these tax collectors and sinners. The worst of the worst he's sitting with. Patrick saw this pattern in Jesus, and he says, no, we're going to start with fellowship. That's where We're going to start at that base level. And then we're going to engage in ministry and conversation. We're not going to just leave it like that, like fellowship is enough. We're going to engage. We're going to ask questions. We're going to pry into the deep matters of the heart and ask the questions that matter. And then there would be the invitation to believe and to commit. What do you guys think about that so far? Do you see that contrast? Do you understand that contrast? Yeah, John?
I've seen a number of people come to faith in Christ who have their lives completely revolutionized during the last 20 years. Every single one of them went through the Celtic model.
Yeah.
I've never seen it happen that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Through a friendship or a...
Relationship first.
Yep.
Then probing questions, let's address her objections, the reasonable objections. Why this, why this, why this? How can you say this? Isn't this a fairy tale? No, you actually think it's real?
Yeah.
And that takes months.
There it
And then the
is.
Spirit moves in that person's heart and they're ready.
Yep.
And that's how people come to Christ.
Yep.
The relationship comes first.
Yeah. Yeah. Doesn't that seem more natural? Think about the way you came to Christ or how you grow in your faith. But that isn't the way that most church ministry is structured. It's based on maybe a more scholastic model or an academic model, where here are the facts that are true, believe them, and we're going to quiz you on them later. Otherwise, you don't get the degree or you don't get to become a church member. But this is not the way that people have historically come to faith. Carol?
I don't want to pull this too far away, but it reminded me when you were talking about the Celtic model of AA, actually. Because you've got fellowship, and then you get a sponsor, and they said you take somebody under your wing, and
Yep.
And then, of course, some of those people do come to believe in a higher power as
Yeah.
it's presented there.
Yeah. The connection you just made is the one scholars make too. They've studied the phenomenon of Alcoholics Anonymous and that 12-step program, but the low threshold of entry, the fact that everyone says, hi, my name is Chris and I'm an alcoholic, you're immediately at the same level, and walking through the steps with a sponsor, someone who's, Patrick, they called it a soul friend. And that thing has taken off like wildfire. It's one of the most successful addiction recovery and the maintenance of that recovery, that program in the world. Yeah.
I'm not sure it's as clear a binary as is presented
Mm-hmm.
on the wall. My heart lives in the Celtic model, but it may be a misunderstanding of the steps under the Roman heading. But I think about the Billy Graham Crusades.
Yeah.
And the monumental effect, at the time largely returning veterans. And that was not a coming alongside, that was being in the presence of someone who inspired. And then that spark
Yeah.
facilitated other movement. Actually, the founder of the company, Ellen and My Company, had his life changed at one of those Los Angeles meetings by Billy Graham.
Yeah.
If the point of this day's session is this body, and the Celtic resonates very much with me.
Mm.
What you do on a Sunday, though, I would suggest is
Yeah.
a piece of the Roman one, and all hoisting beers and casual conversation is wonderful, but at some point you get into more meaty stuff, and the presentation helps nourish as well when it's ready.
Yep, 100%. And it's shown this binary in order to make it clear. But even in the Celtic model, there was Mass every Sunday, and actually there was daily Mass, there were daily prayers. So there was a constant presentation of the gospel. But the difference was the community of faith had these rhythms of proclamation and responding to proclamation. And the seeker or the refugee or whoever was invited to come along into these rhythms without having first made any kind of profession of faith. They were allowed to participate in the life of the community without technically being a member of that community. And then in the process, there came a point where there was a decision to be made. I mean, Billy Graham is, you will always have an amen from me when it comes to people just responding to straight up truth. I mean, look at how the apostles went through cities too, right? Proclamation, the altar of the unknown God, all these kinds of things in the book of Acts. So it isn't either or, but what's the dominating philosophy? What's the main lens through which we think?
Even Paul in Acts, I mean, the facility in which he adapted to the culture around him and shaped. One of my favorite stories in Acts is Paul in Athens, because he's in a hostile crowd that thinks about the world very differently than he does. And he understands how they think about the world.
Yep.
And he starts where they are. He
Yep.
doesn't start where he is.
Yeah, exactly. You had
I
some?
was gonna say, the presentation part, though, is kind of built into our ministry and conversation element here.
Yeah.
So it comes in, it just comes in maybe at a little different stage. And you might even argue that the Billy Graham thing starts with fellowship too. I mean, why are you gonna go to a Billy Graham revival presentation or something unless somebody invites you, or there's something about that group says, I wanna be part of this.
Yeah.
It's a symbiotic
You just to
relationship.
hear
Yeah.
it and see, so it's not like I've gotta be a believer to go listen to Billy Graham.
Yeah, and I might be wrong about this. I know later crusades and campaigns like that did that, but I'm pretty sure that Billy Graham had a strong relationship with the local church pastors wherever he went, and there was follow-up systems in place so that the conversation could continue. It wasn't just like, 1,000 people committed their lives to Jesus Christ. Yes, there's the numbers, and on to the next city. It was an ongoing process, yeah, and a symbiotic relationship for sure. One way you could say this, according to the way that Patrick and his team did it, that Christianity is more caught than taught. I don't know that I 100% believe that, but the idea is pretty clear. You catch it, you sing the songs, and the words get inside of you. You see how these Christians love each other. You feel how welcomed you are when you walk into the building on a Sunday morning, for instance. So Patrick, he took this thing from behave, believe, belong, and he flipped it on its head from belong, believe, become. Let me just break those down a little bit, and then we're going to move into some questions. Belong. What does that mean when we say, or when I'm saying belong? It's the idea that you're welcome here. It doesn't matter where you came from. Doesn't matter where you are in your relationship with God. Doesn't matter your socioeconomic status, cultural status, whatever that is, you belong. And in fact, they were actually more inclined to the people at the fringes of society. They were more inclined to the people who were not accepted in all public situations. Maybe I've told this story at some point. I'm sure that I have. There's this story, I believe it was somewhere in California in the 70s. Big church, everybody's in suit and tie and dresses and fancy hats, and a big church and very formal. And in the middle of the service, as the pastor is beginning to preach and everybody's sitting down, this hippie couple walks in, no shoes on, just kind of messy clothes compared to everybody else in there. And they're walking down this center aisle and they're looking for a chair and they can't find a chair anywhere, no place to sit. And so finally they come to the front of the aisle and they're standing almost right in front of the pastor, and they just sit down on the floor. And everybody's like, you don't do that here. Like, oh, what's the pastor gonna do? This is so awkward. And then one of the oldest members of that church, in his suit and tie, he grabs his cane and he walks shakily down there, and they thought, oh, here comes the confrontation. This is so embarrassing. I can't look. And he goes and he throws his cane on the ground and he sits down next to them. That's what belonging looks like. That's what we're talking about here. We want you to feel at home. It's a high value on hospitality. There's clear ways to connect. When you walk into, it used to be when you walk into Home Depot, maybe it still is, you say, hey, I'm looking for this. Other places will point, oh, it's that way. At Home Depot, they walk with you to the aisle. They're trained to do that. We don't point at Home Depot. We come and show you. That's a high value on hospitality and clarity. For the Christian community, though, it's motivated by Christ's love. Christ reached out to me. He found me when I was in a dark space. His love fills my heart. I'm not going to do this because this is the way it should be done. I'm going to do this because this is what Jesus does. He left heaven to come down to me. Surely I can walk with you to show you where the bathrooms are. It's that idea. The questions that Belong asks is, how can we serve you? Not what are you here to do for us? What are your greatest questions and deepest needs? And it's always an invitation to come into the rhythms of Christian community, to the community of faith. Believe. What is this about? It is, we talked about this a couple weeks ago on Sunday morning, but it is the conviction that everybody needs this message. It's not enough to stop at belonging. It's great. We have a nice place to be together. We like singing songs together and, eating together. We especially love eating together. But it's more than that. There is a king and a kingdom, and there is a message of salvation for all. And this is the greatest human need of everybody, no matter where they are in the world. There's a conviction that belief is essential, not just an optional thing. It's not just in our words, but it's in our rhythms. It's our lifestyle. We're walking in this way of the kingdom. Remember, we spent a few weeks talking about that. So this belief asks questions: where are you in your journey of faith? What are your biggest obstacles to coming to faith? It believes in the power of prayer to even get past intellectual objections. I had lunch with a couple pastors on Thursday, and there was a new guy there, and I do with this what you want. He walks as though he has cerebral palsy. He doesn't have cerebral palsy, but his left leg is really turned in, and so it's just slow moving in places. And one of the other pastors say, "Hey, could you tell me your story?" And he tells a little bit, and so then my friend, or this other pastor says, "Do you have pain?" He says, "Actually, I want to tell you a story about that." He said, "I was a teenager and I was at a camp, and I was a believer, but I wasn't really sure about. I look back now and I think wasn't really sure how active God was in the world today, and does He really still work like He did in the Bible?" And he says they were praying for this woman who had lupus, and so they put there was a bunch of us praying, and so the guy in front of me had his hand on her shoulder and was praying, and he said, and I had my hand on his shoulder because I couldn't reach her shoulder, and so we're praying, and then someone comes from behind me and puts his hand on my shoulder. He says, "Listen, I don't know if you believe this." He says, "But I'm telling you what happened to me." He put his hand on my shoulder. He said it was like a jolt of lightning went through my whole body. I had suffered from intense nerve pain for that whole year, and that nerve pain in an instant went away. And he said that was 9 years ago, and it hasn't come back. Belief knows that God still works today in ways that even bypass logic. Again, do with that what you want. My experience has been similar in different ways, but belief wants people to know that God is real, that He's working today, that He actually can touch lives and change hearts. And become, what's this about? Okay, you belong, you believe. Okay, you're in, right? You got the card. Welcome. Everybody's in. We all believe the same thing. Awesome. No, become says that God created you on purpose and with purpose. As you grow in your knowledge of Him, you also grow in your knowledge of yourself, who you are, what your talents and gifts are, and spiritual gifts. There's this idea, telos, that we've talked about, this Greek word that you have not yet fully become. There is an idea of what God created you to be, and you are becoming that thing as you come closer to Him. In the Chronicles of Narnia, the last battle is my favorite book in that series. And they get to heaven, and one of them yells as they're running up and further in. There's more to see, there's more to do, there's more to become. So become asks the questions, what are your talents? What are your spiritual gifts? Become also asks this question, you're walking through different stages of life. How do you follow God through these various stages of life? What does it look like to follow God as you're caring for aging parents or as you have young kids at home? What does it look like to follow God when you're in your retirement? How about when the kids have left the house and you're still have a career? What does that all look like? Ask those questions. Last thing that I want to say, and then we're going to split up into some table work. How do we get this wrong? How do churches traditionally get this wrong? We'll say a couple things. We'll say you have to believe like we do in order to belong. And so belief becomes before belonging. We'll say you have to behave like we do in order to belong. So in that way, behavior comes before belonging. We'll say you don't have to believe anything ever. We're just so glad the pews aren't as empty as they were before. That says belonging is the only thing that matters. Or we'll say you don't have to grow at all. Just help us maintain everything. And that's saying belonging with belief peppered in a little bit, but no real becoming. And so in all of those situations, whenever we get it wrong, we are either compromising our mission or we're compromising our faith. And the challenge for us is to see what does it look like for us to look at everything we do together as a church community and in our own personal lives. What if we approached it from belong, believe, become, instead of getting stuck on one or getting those things in the improper order? All right, so now we're going to come to some table talk. You'll see on your tables there's a paper, and each of you have a question. What I'm asking you to do is identify strengths and weaknesses in creating. So each of you are answering completely different questions. I'll tell you, this is table one, right?
No.
You're table one. I'm on the ball today. You're table two. You are 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. So table one's going to answer the question, what are our strengths and weaknesses in creating a place of belonging for people inside our community of faith? People who say this is our church. Table 2 is going to ask the question, what are our strengths and weaknesses in creating a place of belonging for people outside our community of faith? All right? So 1 says inside, 2 answers it for outside. Tables 3 and 4 are going to answer strengths and weaknesses in creating a place of believing for inside and outside. And table 5 and 6 are going to say strengths and weaknesses for creating a place of becoming for inside, and 6 for people outside. I'm going to give you 30 minutes to talk about this together. You got plenty of time. Get some coffee, fill your bellies, but get into some good conversation, all right? And then we're going to take 15 minutes after this, and we're going to share a little bit of what we talked about together. All right? Go team.
I just let the kids just go upstairs. They'll come back.
Hope that your conversations were good. We're gonna take some time now and share. I'm gonna ask that one person from each table share, and I'm gonna do an extra ask and ask that you come and stand here, just so it's also in the recording. I want to make sure that we are picking up everything. So everybody, you're going to share just a little bit. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to share the big thoughts and some of the main pieces of your conversation. You don't need to read everything you wrote or rehash it. Maybe there's something that you struggled up against answering, and while you're answering the question that you would kind of want to open that up. But the goal is, I don't know, take a minute or two to present, and then we're all going to give feedback on it. Oh, that's not very helpful to you, is it? There you go. So that we're all going to talk on it together, all right? And we're going to go in order of table. So this is table 1? Yes. Yep.
Introduce yourself. So I'm Jim Bullion. This is Ellen. So our question was, what are our strengths and weaknesses in creating a place of belonging for people inside our community of faith? So the first question, first off the bat, we had a question kind of, what is our community of faith? Is it just people who come to church here? Is it people who belong here, who are members? Or is it the broader community of Christian believers, or people who want to explore Christianity? And we didn't resolve that question, but we think that's one that probably ought to be thought about. How do we welcome and create a belonging community for people beyond those who are here? So we did a strengths and weaknesses list. The strengths list was easy. I mean, that just kind of flowed right out. For a very welcoming group, people, and Elle and I have experienced this, you feel immediately when you walk in that you belong. People just kind of wrap their arms around you and, oh, why didn't I come here earlier? This is where we belong. There's a genuine warmth, really, in the word genuine. People aren't like feeling like, well, Pastor Chris says I've got to be hospitable and welcoming, so I'm going to go do it. And, you know, people really want to welcome people. And
I don't have that much respect here. People just don't.
And it's a genuine warmth and a Christian light. So, and again, that Christianity is at the center of what we do here and what people believe. And having Christianity at the core, helps people feel like they're tied to something, they belong to something here. And the people model Christianity in their lives, the way they welcome people. It's not just a sense of duty, but it's like, well, a sense of duty because this is what Jesus taught us to do to everybody, and that's part of it. There's no judging, so you can join the gospel choir, and nobody's gonna make fun of you if you can't hold a tune or keep notes or whatever, and you can do anything you want and be part of it, and people are gonna welcome you and want you to do it, and people will accept you, but there's also no pressure. Elle and I had the experience in church we were in before, down in the Boston area, and it was kind of a declining church, so there weren't many people, and sort of the same 10 people did everything. And so whenever anybody would walk through the door that we didn't know, we're like vultures. Oh, new, fresh meat we can put on a committee. And you don't get that sense here. You're here because people want you to be here for who you are. So then the what can we do better side, helping people get more involved in opportunities and knowing what those opportunities are. So how do we communicate better to anybody especially those who are maybe new to the community, what are the opportunities? What groups can you join? What are the possibilities? One area we talked a little bit about how the women have different groups, but maybe a men's group of some kind would be useful to have. Get the men together. At our old church, we used to once a month before service, the men would come in and have just a breakfast together, just the men. And we didn't let any women come. So we could just be together, and it was kind of a neat little gathering. Let's see.
I hear all the women saying, I like that. Nothing from the guys.
And we cleaned up after ourselves, too. We talked about this, I think, we're kind of beating this with this dead horse, the more accessible Bible study. And how, if people want to learn more and coming in and want to belong and learn more about the Bible, we need to make that more accessible somehow and explore ways to do that. How do we get deeper connections between each other? So we see each other on Sundays and at various things here, but there aren't many opportunities to really sit next to somebody and really get to know who they are and where they are. And we thought, things such as having small dinners at people's homes. You get a small group together and you go to somebody's house and you spend a couple hours really getting to know each other very, very well. And you do that also through missions activities, where you're working together on something, and maybe even something that's, an overnight or out of the country mission, where you're together and you really get to know each other deeply. Let's see, I think those are really the things that came up. Anything else that we missed?
Good summary.
Okay.
Cool. All right, respond a little bit, and the burden's not just on Jim to respond, but on their whole table, or interact. What do you think about all that? Do you agree, disagree? Do you see things different, Carol?
I like the men's group idea, that's appealing to men, and also the small dinner, small group dinners that's what you do.
Yeah.
In addition to that, I was thinking, we always had potlucks multiple times. I mean, I know we're having our first one forever, tomorrow, but we had those
I wouldn't say monthly, but at least every other month, there was some occasion, like we do mission, like Madeline's thing, Madeline Flores' last week, would have been potluck and that. And so they were tiebreak, and that's you're sitting around and talking with people that you can't do in the sanctuary and
Yeah.
before service or the little bit of fellowship time we have. But those potlucks and people would help clean up, and it was just a real getting to know people.
And there's nothing like going into someone else's home too.
True.
To see how they live and then
True.
you feel like, well, you know what they do during the week when they're not around here. Gotta clean it
Yeah.
up, guys. David.
I think you also mentioned different times for things.
Yeah.
There's a Bible study Wednesday mornings now, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, that's great, but for those of us that work, Bible study early in the evening it will include some other types of
Yeah.
participants.
Yep. Yeah. 100%. Yeah. Yeah, it is a recurring theme. Yeah.
A time like today.
What's
I
that?
think that's like
Mark
been the
Hardy,
theme
what
for the
works
morning.
for you?
Any but Wednesday.
Actually,
One evening.
Tuesday for this kid, Tuesday morning is.
Yeah, just like.
Could you do an evening one?
It doesn't work for me in the morning.
No. No.
But an evening.
Evening.
Yeah.
So what evening, Mark? We need a date, a time by 2 hours.
Thursday?
Yeah, it can't be Thursdays, because that's choir.
Oh, Thursday we have.
Tuesday?
Mondays, Tuesdays.
He'll give an answer at the end of the session.
Yeah.
Mark, no pressure.
No
pressure, Mark.
Yeah. So we'll coordinate. We'll coordinate, but it doesn't just have to be Mark, huh? You don't have to have experience preaching or teaching in church in order to facilitate a Bible discussion, which is what Mark was saying before too. So yeah, Carol.
I just thought of this, we used to have square dances.
I will swear you.
Yeah.
The mill game played, and I think, yeah.
Good times.
Oh, cool. All right, that's great. Let's move on to the next table, table 2, strengths and weaknesses for creating a place of belonging for people outside our community of faith. So that was inside. What about people outside our community of faith?
Okay, so I'm Dan Weinstein. Again, the question was, what are our strengths and weaknesses in creating a place of belonging for people outside our community of faith? This one, just a precursor, speaks home to me, because I think a lot of you know this, but when Amelia and I came to the church, we came as an interfaith couple. I grew up in a Jewish faith, Amelia in a Methodist, Christian faith. So this speaks to me. I felt like I came outside of the community of faith, but I feel like I belong, and that's a huge kudos. And in terms of strengths and weaknesses, there's a whole lot of strengths there because I felt that belonging and feel that belonging. But what we spoke about I'll start with some strengths. Coming as you are, whether it's where you are in religion or faith or however you are, there's a practicing what's preached of welcoming. We felt like there's an extensive network outside of the church. I mean, part of it is just the area that we live in, but everyone knows everyone. And it's like, one step removed, we basically know everyone in the Upper Valley. So the opportunity to bring the Upper Valley into our community is extensive if we try. There's a feeling of safety, openness to all. Chris, so we found a leader of the community who is, to the outside world, we feel not just a preacher, but he has chickens, he coaches basketball, he's a community member.
The chickens are what do it though, right?
I just mean, it's really important. I mean, there's a lot of what makes someone sort of a, Etna person or Upper Valley or in New Hampshire, and I think if an outsider, I hate to contrast with other pastors that we've had exposure to, but you are not a preacher first necessarily when people from the outside see you're welcoming and you sort of speak in other ways, and that's big. I won't go way off topic, but I introduced something that, so I have a business background, and in business we not only talk about strengths and weaknesses, but there's a type of analysis called SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So strengths and weaknesses are what are internal to us, like what do we do well, what do we not do well. Opportunities and threats are, besides us, what's just like in our environment that's providing opportunity to welcome, or in our environment that's a threat to that belonging. And we thought of a couple of opportunities. One is we happen to have great real estate. We happen to have, so there are two churches, and we'll come to that in maybe a weakness or a challenge, but we're right next to a field where the community already gathers here. We're right next to another field where the community has opportunities to gather, and that's an opportunity for that belonging. And in particular, this hall that we're in, Trumbull Hall, I don't know all the history, but it sounds like there have been a lot of opportunities in the past to welcome, not just within the community of faith, but outside, based on what we have here in this hall we're sitting in. For weaknesses, maybe a confusion of what our church is. The two churches has potential to cause some confusion. Potentially that we don't do enough, so we thought of things like the pie concert, Fall Fest, which is a relatively new thing, and the chicken pie supper, but that in the scheme of things, that's not a lot for opportunities to welcome belonging for those outside the community of faith. We talked a little about needing to reinforce the community and fellowship, not just religion, and this is a little bit of the threat category. Outside of us, it's just, we talked about religion and politics, both being things that are sort of difficult to raise outside, and is that a hindrance to bringing people in because they think, ooh, this is a sensitive topic of a religious group, so is it hard to bring people in? So how do we do that outreach? How do we talk about religion if we're going to? Or just make it seem like it's not about faith, it's about broader community involvement. And another weakness was outreach. Not that we're bad at it, but that we could do more of it. Did I miss anything?
Cool, thanks. Hey, respond, reflect. Yeah.
So I think an opportunity for outreach, and it was mentioned here, was advertising. So I think, Chris, your energy is great, and the one demographic or so that we could do better with is the younger families. Church I was going to before, there's a pretty good younger family crowd. And, advertising the Valley News or the listservs, representing that we have a Sunday school,
Yeah.
I think it's the type of thing, we just get a few more younger families in, and maybe a few more will come, and then more and more.
Yeah.
Perhaps that's a challenge a lot of churches are facing, that demographic these days. But have we thought about advertising?
We've made small forays into advertising, but we haven't done much beyond kind of shoring up what we already do. Yeah.
Those little ads on Lou's placemats,
Oh, yeah.
Come join us at,
Yeah,
when you're
yeah.
sitting there, Lou's, do
Yeah.
You mentioned seasons of life earlier, and David, as you were speaking, you got me thinking about this in a different way. As a child, you're brought to faith and religious services by your parents. As you become independent, some continue, many fall away, but often for quite a while. And there's often a niggling thought in the background, like, I gotta come to grips with this. But as a single person, even as a married couple, you can push it off. You got a lot of other things that you're trying to resolve. When you have children, it becomes more immediate. Now you're responsible for someone else. And David, that's the advertising works particularly on those that are sort of predisposed towards it in some way. That demographic would seem to have more likely predisposed to the possibility of trying something. And if you get them in the door, then you're going to rely on your other strengths. But having people come to the door, it's a big step. And you can, advertising is one way to have it out there. The listservs are another, have been mentioned.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things that we found at our own church is the number one thing that gets people to walk through the door is an invitation.
Yeah.
We invite somebody, you know, hey, do you go to church? You wanna come join us? We got a great group, we have terrific coffee afterwards, you know, music's fun, just, you know, come join us on Sunday.
Yeah.
Buy coffee, buy your place.
Yeah. Yeah. Susan?
The Pathways group had talked about, or you had talked about having like coffee available for the parents who are out there with their kids, or getting, you know, having.
While they're on the field.
While they're on the field, or even like oranges for the kids if they don't have them. Just something to know that we're providing, and hey, this is a church, because people don't always realize we're a church.
Yeah.
They just, oh, let's, you know, Trumbull Hall, they don't realize we're a church with Trumbull Hall.
It's an active church, it's not just an old antique, right?
Yeah. That's, like, that is a huge opportunity that we've got just a lot more to tap into, just right there, yeah. Yeah, Lori?
I was just gonna add to that, as you know, we live in Lyme, and you wouldn't believe how hard it is for me to tell people where I go to church. They have no idea this is a church.
Mm.
And they think it's the, oh, you mean that big church on the corner? Like, well, that's Trumbull Hall. Actually, the sanctuary is the beautiful little brick one. You know, like the Hanover Center Church, everybody knows what that is, because it's whiteness, it's a. So just to amend that, I know that the trustees are putting up a new sign out in front, which I think will be really helpful. And they talked about taking the old sign and putting it somehow in front of the brick part of this church. So people do realize that is a church. So
Yeah.
I just think that's a good, it's
Yeah.
a mini step. It's a good one. I'm glad we really affected.
But where are we, sorry?
It's being made out of our hands. John's the one.
We got the permit for the sign.
Good.
We're trying to get a permit for the lighting. And that's just the act of God. We live in Hanover.
What will the signs, what is the sign gonna say? What will it cost?
John,
The sign is being, it's in production as we speak in Texas, and will be shipped here within the next several weeks.
So the sign is for, it says First Baptist Church. So it's for this building is First Baptist Church, yeah.
And then there's a space to make
I
it.
guess the granite post is supposed to be done, 4 weeks ago.
it should be about the
So
same
that should be
time.
about the same time.
Yeah.
Because the question mark is, since we're a combined group here, are people gonna think, oh, this is just a Baptist church? And that's a unique denomination, I'm not a Baptist, so I can't go there. I mean, does it make more sense to do that, or have it say the combined church of Etna and Hanover Center?
That's what we
I
talked
mean,
about.
maybe I'm talking out of turn here.
No, no. Marjorie?
So, I don't know if this has to do with your question or not, but something we've talked about, I think it was in the Interchurch Council, but is like having, in other churches, they have this alpha course, like, what does it mean to be part of this faith? Or like an introduction for newcomers who maybe didn't grow up in the church, or maybe went as a youth and have not gone in 10 or 15 years, and like actually what that actually means. Is having, some churches have like a little intro course to Christian faith, and you learn about the building and you may learn about the denomination, but more importantly, you learn about sort of the basics of Christianity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Maxine? I'll come back to David.
Too, you said there's a space where we can put announcements. I think it'd be really important when we first put it up, say everyone is welcome.
Yeah, it's a sign where you can put different messages on it. So we wanted an LED sign, but Hanover shot that down.
But when we first put it up, we put everyone's welcome.
Yeah. Yeah, David?
This might be out of turn too, and this is, I'm speaking about something I don't really understand, frankly. But I've had more than one person, when I say I go here and I enjoy this, they say, well, that's a Baptist church. And there's some kind of a negative reaction to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a difference, a distinction between Southern Baptist and Northern Baptist. And I don't know what that distinction is really. But in regard to branding, is there a reason why we are compelled, or just an historical, that's what we are? because for a while there, it says something, the Church of Etna in Hanover, and it doesn't use the term Baptist in there. I hate the notion of us turning anybody away because of some predisposed notion of what Baptist church is.
I think, I mean, saying something like "come as you are" or "everybody's welcome," like having that explicitly on there can help to sort of alleviate any questions that people might have there. Is that being able to say, like, just everybody's welcome. Come as you are is, I feel like, really helpful to kind of get around that. Because you're right, I mean, we didn't know. I was raised Methodist, and we didn't really know what we were walking into when we first came here, and like, what that's gonna be like.
But did you find Baptist a turnoff? I mean, that's how I'm hearing this, that because it says Baptist, that's a turnoff.
So I can't really articulate, but I know exactly what you're talking about. Like I think I think there is a negative connotation to that, and it's almost like radical isn't the right word, but like, you know, and for us specifically, like, are we gonna be welcome, or is this gonna be like a hostile environment that I'm bringing my Jewish husband into? Like,
But would you have felt the same way if it said, the Catholic Church?
I wouldn't have gone to it.
That's what it takes.
I would not have walked into it.
That's kind of my point.
Yeah.
It's not that it's Baptist, that it could say Catholic, and it would have maybe the same outcome.
I think
What I'm wondering.
Well,
Catholic, like, that's more me. I had a lot of friends who were Catholic growing up, and it was very, like, they were like, you can't come here, you have to pretend you're Catholic, like, pretend you speak Latin. I'm like, I don't know what to say to that. But for Baptists, it's more that, like, I just hadn't really encountered it personally. And I think there's just some confusion between, like, Southern Baptists and, like, probably hear a little bit of political connotations of, like, maybe it's not welcoming, and so
Westboro Baptist.
yeah,
kinda
like,
stuff, yeah.
so I think that could potentially, but not that we shouldn't put Baptist, because we are a Baptist community.
I was
It's
just
our
gonna
legal-
say
But
that.
if we say,
We are a Baptist
we
church.
are, but if we say something like, come as you are, everybody's
Right.
welcome, then it reinforces, like, we're actually really good people, and we wanna meet you.
So, yeah, yeah, Dina?
Well, I was just gonna say the message of the fact that we are two churches mixed together, two different religions,
Makes everyone
is
welcome.
perfect.
It takes a lot.
But how do we get that out there, though? A lot
Yeah.
of people don't know that.
Yeah. So since we're on this, and we're spending a little bit more time on this, but this is a big conversation for us, right? I was talking with a group of pastors who, by the way, are all American Baptists. Actually, no, that's not true. One's Episcopalian charismatic. That's Episcopalian / charismatic. But anyway,
Know what that is?
what's that? Episcopalian?
Episcopalian charismatic.
It's a mix of two different streams of the church. Very high church and very low church together.
Is the American form of the Anglican Church, which was founded so Henry VIII could get divorced. It's basically, other than doctrinally, it's a lot like the Catholic Church.
It's a Catholic church with no pope and not as much emphasis on Mary.
I
Yeah.
was just gonna say,
And the priest can get married.
Yes. Yeah. So, but the denominationalism was the era that we're coming out of in the church. I'll just make this real quick, where when the culture is already primed for the Christian message, when we're familiar with who Jesus is and the claims of the church, the denominations were a way of finding your way into a niche. Today, as our culture moves away from denominationalism, it's really the broader culture can't make a difference between denominations. Episcopalian, maybe they'll see somebody walking around investments, or traditional and contemporary, maybe they might make distinction. I think the challenge with Baptist right now, the name Baptist, is there's a lot happening in the Southern Baptist Convention right now that has hit the news, and so that, and I mean, it's a few years ago, but the Westboro Baptist, like Baptist right now, has a connotation of cultural aggression a little bit. So I mean, some guys named Christopher have done some bad things too. I'm not going to change my name, but it is a real challenge to get across, and we have to. Since these two churches went to one worship service in 1990, a whole different culture. And I wasn't here in 1990, but I see how a whole different culture that's truly interdenominational has emerged. When I interviewed here, someone said the word ecumenical or interreligious. It's not truly interreligious, it's interdenominational, where it's people coming from different Christian streams. I see that as a real strength to our church, but it's challenging in the communication of it. And everybody has said, ask me, well, which church do you pastor? Well, it's two, but we're one. And you wouldn't really know that we're two. Well, annual meetings, then, we have our different annual meetings. And yeah, membership is a real thing. Who goes where and how do we make those decisions and all that. But if we're talking about let me try to steer us back on track here. If we're talking about belonging and extending belonging to outsiders, the way we communicate who we are and advertising and all that kind of thing, that's the reason why when I tell people what church I pastor, I say the Church of Etna and Hanover Center. And then that's broad. There's no denomination associated with that name. And then as they get to know, I say, well, we're made up of two churches, but we have people I came from a Pentecostal background. There's others who came from Lutheran, and we have some people who come that are from Catholic background and congregational, even though the Baptists are also congregational, but we won't go into that. So it's a hodgepodge, kind of like families usually are. But it is a challenge. It's an advertising challenge. And that might be one of the things we're not quite sure how to communicate it. So when you guys are talking about advertising and opportunities on Lose and that kind of thing, that's something that maybe we need to put a little work group together and just figure out, hey, what are we going to do? And then just go for it and do it so that people do know we're here. Let me turn the corner on this, because we got 4 more tables that need to present. We could probably talk about this the rest of the morning. But table 3, strengths and weaknesses and creating a place of believing for people inside our community of faith.
Okay, so we thought that some of our strengths were, again, it's already been mentioned, we are a very welcoming church. And people who come in feel like they belong kind of right when they come. And they feel included in most things that go on with the events that we have here. We wrote down one of our strengths was community outreach. We do have a lot of people who are active in our community, a lot of younger people. We have the older generations who have been around and know a lot of people in our local community. So we do kind of have a lot of word of mouth resources there. And then we also, goes along with that we know our community. We know a lot of people. We know a lot of the organizations, local businesses, that sort of thing, that we can also get our word out that way. And then going off of the weaknesses that we just said with how people perceive our title as a Baptist church may be somewhat off-putting or make them a little bit more hesitant. And then not enough opportunities to create more of a fellowship opportunity with our active church members, like we have more potluck dinners or just an opportunity to chat with the members of our church and get to know who we are as people. And again, with the kind of not knowing that the building is here, if you have all of our community stuff out there with the younger sporty generations on the field, they're not familiar with the fact that this is actually a church. We're not just a hall or a beautiful beautiful brick building.
It's a really nice bathroom there that they built for us.
We did have an idea from Becky that in the past there had been kind of some mention of inviting a friend Sunday, so that if you were inviting people, they didn't feel singled out just coming as a random person to church. There would be other unfamiliar faces that would be another form of outreach for people. See what our church is all about.
Cool.
The point in that was to make one Sunday, so that if I invited somebody, they didn't see the same people. They would see perhaps their friends that had been invited by another person. So it was an interim, I think, idea. And I don't remember if we ever acted on it.
We did.
We did. All right, I can't remember that part, but.
When I was growing up, they had a Sunday in September called Back to Church Sunday. And it was everybody invite a friend and yeah, cool.
And we'll do extra snacks and more coffee.
Yeah. You put your best face forward and yeah.
Chris?
Yes.
I think and you can put it, it'll be lit. And you
Yeah.
can put, well,
It's big.
Yeah,
It will be
you'll see it's a
well-
church.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The word
yeah,
I think.
which was the whole
Right
idea.
there, you can't, you know,
You can't
see
see
where-
it until you're past it.
Yeah,
I think it'll make a big difference.
yeah. All right, anybody want to respond to that at all? All right. I know, we're still transitioning from the last one, but it's all right, we're good. Let's go to table 4. And by the way, I didn't say this, I would love, I don't care if your writing is legible or not. I'd love to have these papers after we're completely done for today. So you have taken notes on your important conversations. I can always send them off to a translator if I need be. That was a joke. Table 4, what are our strengths and weaknesses in creating a place of believing for people outside our community of faith?
I worked at a place one time where our VP of R&D had handwriting that was so bad, we had a contest to decipher one of the notes he had left for one of the senior staff.
All right.
With that, yeah, so we actually got a little bit hung up, not hung up, actually the opposite of hung up. We actually fell off of the knife edge between believing and belonging, and so I'm not sure we were quite as on task as we should have been. And ironically, most of what I have to say has already been said, so maybe that.
Okay.
Susan can't kick me from here.
I don't know.
So there are definitely, and we've already just heard about them, there are definitely challenges to the notion of, and the practicality of having yoked congregations. But from our perspective, so the topic of believing, which I think we took pretty literally in terms of, Christian doctrine, theology, dogma. Okay, take those words as you will. For people on the outside, it's a real strength to be yoked congregations because we have a spectrum of understanding of a lot of important Christian doctrinal tradition. Baptism, we have very different perspectives. I can tell you from congregate to congregate about baptism, the sacrament of baptism, and about Holy Communion, because different denominations feel differently about it. When you're talking about people outside, the stuff that we can get hung up on and literally wars have been fought about, doesn't matter to them.
Mm.
But they don't even have a basic understanding. One of the things that we've seen, so it's a strength here that we can accept people at a, I'm gonna say, theological level, come as you are. Not just come as you are as a human being, but come as you are as a searching Christian. That it's okay if you don't believe that the true presence of the body of Jesus Christ, blood and body of Jesus Christ are present in, with, and under the cup and the wafer. That's okay, because don't get hung up on the ephemera. That's not going to be what's going to get you in or keep you out of heaven on the last day. Is going to be what you believed about that. So that's a real strength. Our sense was, though, that we kind of focused on weaknesses, and that is, although we are very good, we're pretty good. Actually, Eric said okay. I would give us a pretty good on the proclamation piece. The Sunday morning experience, right? We do a pretty good job with the Sunday morning experience. We do a bad job with the follow-up as discipling each other. It's certainly not an intentional job of walking with other people who are wherever they are on their walk, from they're here because somebody got married here, which is why we're here, by the way, but anyway. Or they're, deeply committed, very spiritual people coming from a very different background, say, and I'm going to be pejorative, lapsed Catholics, okay? Or lapsed Lutherans, for that matter. We're not too good at that, and we definitely have opportunities for discipleship. What we are good at is, we're good, and we've heard it multiple times, and I want to specifically call out Rebecca and Becky for that outreach, for that walking up to those people who walk in the door and maybe don't know what's going on, maybe don't know what they're doing here, and just at least making them feel comfortable, So we're pretty good at that part. We're not so good at the follow-up piece. It was specifically mentioned, we will have people who show up, come regularly for a couple of months and disappear. They don't move away, they just stop coming. And as far as we know, we're not very good at following up with those folks and finding out why they're not here. If you're thinking about church growth, you really want to think more about the people that aren't in here than the people that are. And we're the worst we're the worst qualified people to do that imaginable. The best data you're gonna get is from people who either didn't come in the door at all, because as some of you said, they don't even know there's a door. You know, or did come in the door, but for some reason went somewhere else. And those reasons may be banal, or they may be profound, and we have no insight.
So what you're saying there's an opportunity to get some data on
Yes,
why
that
people.
we leave on the table.
Yep.
And we should
Some
work-
people will come and then they'll stop coming, and why. Yep.
And we kind of take the left side, the Roman approach towards believing we're pretty good at explaining what we do, and I think we've gotten a lot better at it. You know, I think you always run the risk of, on Sunday morning, when you get this bulletin that's got stuff in it, that, especially if it says the Lord's Prayer, and you're in the middle of the service, and all of a sudden everybody starts saying words that you don't know. But we've gotten pretty good in recent years, and even more so since Chris has been here, to actually explain what the bits and pieces, what the bones of the service are, why they're in there, what they mean, and in cases where we do things by rote, that those things are actually written down for people who didn't grow up with this tradition. You know, you think about it, we live in a post-Christian world, and people don't know this stuff inside and out, upside down. They haven't ever seen it before, and it's arcane to them, and it's scary and awful. So,
Yeah.
boys, did I forget anything?
Cool. The voice. All right, reflect and respond. What do you think? Do you see the same things? Do you agree, disagree? I'm finding that we're all pretty much on the same page with a lot of this, which is nice. Yeah?
I do love the follow-up thing.
Yeah.
Because I think even for me, like working with the kids, I have had a lot of new families come through, and sometimes they've been like one time, or they come maybe like once a month, and so I do think that it's a good reminder for me, just to kind of do follow-up in that respect.
Yeah.
I totally agree with that. And you said that they, stop coming, maybe they're going someplace else, or no place at all, which maybe is more likely.
Yeah.
And what you're suggesting, I think makes perfect sense, and it's under the category of walking alongside. And it may not be a conscious decision not to go, but sort of losing it in the fog of day-to-day with a young family. And just a reach out would be all it would take to perhaps change their mind. But you're exactly right. Preaching to the choir is not what Jesus asked us to do.
Yeah.
That coming alongside, I went to a church for a while where if there was a new family that, not necessarily the first time they came, but the second time they came, a family in the church would intentionally invite that family over for a meal. And it really increased the retention of new families because they felt welcome at the church, but they also started to build a relationship. And we found that building that relationship with that family, that one family coming alongside, made a huge difference.
Yeah. Yep. Let me just highlight that there is some follow-up that happens. It happens behind the scenes. It's usually a couple individuals who say, I haven't seen this person in a while. They'll come to me, have you heard from them? And I'll say, I haven't. And they'll say, I'm going to call them or I'm going to email them. So there is some follow-up that happens, but we don't necessarily have a system to ensure that that happens every time, or kind of a plan for doing that always.
What do you find the experience of that follow-up has been, Chris? What intelligence
Life.
have you gleaned? Yeah.
Yeah, it's usually life stuff that gets in the way of people coming back, parents or kids or something like that. Up until this point, it hasn't been, oh, this happened, or I'm going somewhere else. It's usually, I'm not going anywhere because of life stuff. Yeah. Eric?
I would like to defend the statement that we do an okay job of.
You were put a little bit on the spot there, so go ahead.
Fostering the belief, in the Sunday service. When you're in the pulpit, you're teaching a very tiny slice of the gospel. Now, we could be a church that gives the gospel every Sunday and has an altar call. I don't think we want to be that church. But that would accomplish that goal. I think more what Marjorie described is some foundational material that anybody who hasn't been exposed to that can take advantage of that. So whether it's, you know, the Alpha course that Marjorie mentioned or something we put together, there is not a shred of common belief. Really, this congregation is full of people from so many traditions, and I think that would be helpful, particularly for outsiders. What do these folks believe in? And I don't think we do a particularly good job. But it's not faulting the Sunday service.
Yeah,
No,
two
no.
things. One is, Eric did say that explicitly, and I deliberately for that. Point well taken. The other thing I want to say is, don't forget, and I actually meant to say this too, don't forget that Pastor Chris has spent the last 47 weeks or whatever, one question at a time, going through a catechism with the kids. And that's not just for the kids, boys and girls, it's also for us. And it does help. I think it does at least make a gesture towards that idea of some little c Catholic, broadly held understanding of the basic tenets of Christianity.
Very much agree, if you come for 47 Sundays.
Yeah.
Well, at least you get some of them, right?
Well, there's an opportunity. What I'm hearing you say is there's an opportunity for that to be expanded beyond the Sunday morning. And we could increase it on Sunday morning too, but what is this message we believe, and what are the doors for an outsider to come into that message? Yeah.
But am I also hearing, Eric, that one of the things you're suggesting is maybe when we read our Bible passages, that we have a little context for, okay, this is what was going on, this is why this is in the Bible, this is what part of the Bible it's in, so that a newcomer would say, okay, this isn't just like 3 verses just picked out of nowhere. Get it, how it fits into the whole, right? Or, where was it in Jesus' ministry when he said this?
No, biblical literacy.
Just a real short intro to put it in context.
I'm probably gonna botch the delivery on this, so I'm just prefacing with that. But I think so when we're looking at the community and some of the folks that we're trying to bring in, I think what I've heard a lot over the last year or two, and even before you joined us, was we need more young families. We need more folks to come in. And when we're thinking about like what brought us into the church, number one, I will say, is the music. The first time that we heard the Etna Gospel groups like playing and singing, we were like, oh yeah, no, these are our people. Like this, we can do this. But it's really the feeling of community and like, yes, I think there are questions that people will have about like what specifically do they believe, but really it's that feeling of like, do we feel like these folks have the same values that we do, and that we're gonna be bringing our kids into a place where they have a community that's gonna help them, because on our minds is we have kids that are gonna reach adolescence, and they're gonna have, like, being a teenager now sucks so much. Like, it is awful. And to have a group that is, sort of insulating your kids as they're aging, as they're getting to a place of social media, and they're getting to like all of these pressures that were never there when any of us were kids, we try to protect that, and we do that in very intentional ways, including here. This is, so I think when we're thinking about like what brings in young families, yes, I think a lot of those lessons are helpful context, but that's not what hooked us. Like, what hooked us is the community, the feeling that like people were around. We feel like we have just a very extended family helping to kind of swat our kids when they're not behaving in the back row and they're talking. Like, that's Becky. Like,
You're just saying supportive, that some of
yes.
has your values.
That's what I meant. By swat our children, I mean support our family.
I thought you were talking about giving a SWOT analysis, like what are the strengths, weaknesses?
Different SWOT.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think that sort of thing is built in like the events that So Fall Fest, in like putting together something for Christmas where we are bringing in communities, and it's a lower pressure. I think in our generation, I find it harder to have any sort of religious conversation. Like, I know which of my friends I can have those conversations with, and which of them are just like immediately I rolled back in their head when I start like, so having an event that's lower pressure and being able to have like, if there's pie So come and have pie. That's easy to extend an invitation, and then they just feel what everybody puts out there, which is this like warm hug as you walk into the space. So I don't know.
I
Those are
totally
my
agree
thoughts.
with that, like, I feel like the community part of it would come first before any sort of religious talk, for lack of better terms, but I feel like that's gonna be
Yeah.
where we can put our foot in
Yeah.
successfully with the younger, our
Yeah.
generation.
Yep.
Yep.
I feel like.
Yep.
I think
But
Chris
that-
said this when we first were interviewing him, that the way to grow a church is with the youth. Because they bring, for instance, if you're in, I just heard there's going to be some Christmas play program. And if you invite more than the kids who already come, which is what Rebecca was saying, if you do that, well, as a grandparent, you know the grandparents are gonna come. But that brings the child in as part of the program, and the parents for sure. Grandparents are gonna just bite on that like crazy.
Yeah.
So, and that's building subtly, and the kid reeled them in. It's
Yeah.
not- It's a more subtle way to do it. Get them here first.
Yeah.
That's what we've all been.
Eric?
I mean, that's just getting the belonging from the belief.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
which is, I think, the order we're talking
Yeah.
about this morning.
Yeah, and the belief question comes, okay, they're here, they're, or they're at least aware, what are the on-ramps to faith and growing in faith, yeah?
I do want to say, and I will be brief, that we wouldn't be here. I'm one of those people who would be uncomfortable with walking, I mean, much less joining a church that was, they call itself a Baptist church, just from, you know, whatever baggage I have from the past. But we are here because, you know, from the time that our daughter got married here, we just, and then we came here while we were church shopping after we retired and moved up here, that there was a very welcoming spirit here, and it was an authentic one. It wasn't that somebody was assigned to come and say hello to me and spend 5 minutes talking to me, which is not my thing. But there was, that authenticity sort of percolates through the place, and it's very palpable.
Yeah.
So I would say we're already actually pretty good at that. Maybe not real intentional at it, but we're pretty good at it.
Yeah, I agree.
You would say the same thing. I mean, whether you're-
Yeah, I still remember being here and Becky and John came up to us and they were like, hello. And I was like, oh boy, what's gonna happen?
Oh, you picked her right off.
But it was, I mean, we definitely had our guard up because we have been to churches where as an interfaith couple, like it wasn't, and we've been to temples too. It's not just, like we've been to places where we're not both welcome and it's not comfortable, and then it just creates this tension. And so for us walking in, that was number one. We were like, look, just everybody know, like, he's Jewish. We're not all like this, and everyone was like, that's great, awesome, fine.
We're not
Totally
that
fine.
young.
Who cares was exactly
Yeah.
like, who
We all
cares?
read our Bible, we're all Jewish too.
Yeah. Mert, you
Yeah,
had to say
so-
something?
I think part of the reason maybe why younger folks aren't coming to their churches readily is that this is a big sports area. We're competing against games on Sunday mornings. and
Or
games
ice
in-
time.
Whatever, so
Mhm.
it's that outside force
Yep.
that we don't have control over.
Yeah, if there was ever an argument for creating what did you want to say?
Well, I just wanted to, I totally agree, and we never went through this until this fall.
Yeah.
When Henry started soccer, but last year in the wintertime, I had a random conversation, well, it wasn't random, because this little boy was in Henry's class at the race school, and so then they're talking in CBS, and then I just get talking with the dad. Come to find out, and Henry had no idea that this little boy and his family are believers, but because of their hockey schedule and ski schedule and everything, they have not found anywhere that they can go to church. And they are I think like the wife is, he grew up Baptist, the wife grew up Catholic, so they are kind of from two different denominations. But anyways, so I said, oh, that's so interesting. It's not something that we've had to deal with personally yet. Now we have, and I totally get it. But he said, I wish that there was a church in the area, because they live in Hanover, that had something for the families, even if it was seasonally, that we could come and we could, he said, because I miss it. And it's, so I'm just throwing that out there, because it was what I thought, such a random conversation in CVS in Hanover, but maybe not so random to God. But it's something to think about, like, how can we reach those people? Because I do believe there are people, and I think they're in this struggle. We want our kids to do sports, and they're feeling the pressure from these sports teams, but they miss community. They miss coming together with a group of like-minded people and worshiping on a Sunday morning. Maybe that's not a Sunday morning. Maybe it's another evening in the week.
Didn't he mention Saturday night?
I think he said Friday.
Friday night.
So 40 years ago, the Catholic Church, for some reason, crushed its marketing by Saturday evening.
Mass, right?
masses,
Yeah.
A theme that's come up a number of times this morning is sort of a more wider open calendar, so people with varying conflicts could make things through Wednesday morning 10 a.m. Bible study as an example. This could be, is there a service, and it's hard to be all things to all people and all time, it's a struggle, and more is not necessarily good, but is there, with wider opportunities of worship or fellowship, is there a window of opportunity that might work for younger families? The one other thought was the authenticity of the welcoming. I totally agree with, and have felt ourselves, and that gives you the credibility and the ability to get to the other thing, that the second part of the oath that's so important is the authenticity of the belief and the message, and that the core of that can't be compromised. And of the C.S. Lewis image of the various rooms in the house, and that's the denominations that I would get. You get 2 rooms here within this one heading. Yes.
Yeah.
That's a great comment.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's, these are, yeah. All right, let's go to the next table, because there's more I want to hear from. So table 5, what are our strengths and weaknesses in creating a place of becoming for people inside our community of faith?
I'm John Wilson, for those who don't know me. We reiterated some of the things that previous folks had said, but one of the specific things that came up is folks who are coming into the group find themselves able to utilize their strengths in various ways. They feel welcomed into helping in various roles, and that was a strength. We tend to welcome new believers in and support them, just emotionally, socially, and we have some opportunities for studying the Bible together, eating together, fellowshipping together. Those were strengths. Some weaknesses, areas where we could improve is this church really doesn't have any sort of small group fellowship opportunity. And that's an area where when people are becoming mature in their faith, they really need this. They need a way to connect with a limited number of people with whom they become very familiar, with whom they become good friends, with whom they can share the real details of their personal lives and address the challenges that they meet along the road from a spiritual Christ-centered point of view. And this is something that is common in most churches and that we just don't have here. That's an area where we could improve, the small group fellowship or discipleship group area. It was mentioned that stagnation happens in personal way or in a group way if there's no growth. If you want to survive, then you need to grow. You need to be able to change. You need to adapt. So that's one of the things that the whole group here is well aware of. But things are not necessarily going to be, nor can they be, the way they have been. We have to be open to change. So that's potential weakness or an opportunity, depending on how you look at that. Another potential weakness that could be avoided is forming cliques that are difficult to penetrate. That's a problem in most groups. I haven't seen that here as much, but I think there is some siloing that goes on,
whether we're aware of it or not. And some of the silos, center around demographics, some of the silos center around family groups, and that's just something to be aware of that I think is an opportunity to avoid. So it's an area of potential growth. So I'll leave it at that.
Okay, that's great, thanks. Feedback, response? Yeah,
I just want to make a comment about the small groups. I'm glad you said that, Roger Group said that. We actually touched on that too, but one of the amazing things about small group ministry is, I call it the foxhole mentality. If you have a bunch of people, we can pick 6 people at random and say, okay, every 2 weeks, you're gonna meet and you're gonna have dinner and you're gonna talk about, I have a canned Bible study for you. I'm gonna give you a sheet of paper and you're gonna read some Bible verses and you're gonna talk about it. And at the end of that, and you're gonna do that for 10 months. At the end of that 10 months, you would take a bullet for each other because life goes on during those 10 months. And you face it the way you face it, and you all of a sudden have 5 other people who can commiserate with you when the time comes, whether you had any intention of doing it or not. You do that for a while, and all of a sudden, you know what? You know each other really well. And that's the growth. That's the intangible piece of that intentional small group ministry that you know will happen, but you can't really script.
yeah. Iron sharpens iron kind of idea, yeah? Yeah, at first I thought you said you would take a bullet to each other after 10 minutes.
We have made friends for life. Friends for life in small group.
You know, what is it with this, and this is kind of a side thing, but why do we maybe in America, why do we have the idea that we should never be upset with each other, and that means it's a good relationship? Aren't the best relationships the ones where you just get upset with each other and then you get over it together too? Yeah, you get upset. That's marriage. That's family. That's friendship. Yeah.
Yeah, but if you get the last 2 words, yes, dear.
Yeah. Yeah, Maxine.
And I don't think a lot of people realize that the deacons and deaconesses do go out into the community quite often and try to check for shut-ins or people who have had illness and
Yeah.
stuff. So we do that, but it's behind the scenes, so a lot of people don't think that we communicate with somebody else.
Sure. Yeah. What I hear is a broader sentiment of among all the church, not just necessarily in one committee, but yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. I didn't know it, but as an ongoing thing, perhaps there's an opportunity to take a minute, 2 minutes at the occasional service and share a story from one of those.
Yeah.
Without specific names.
Without specific
anonymously,
names.
but
Just,
situation.
It would not surprise me that there are very memorable encounters that you have with this. Sharing that'd be special.
Yeah. Yeah. For all of you in committees that just got the questions that Carol sent out for me to everybody, that's part of the reason those questions go out, so that we can, and a new issue of the Vine is coming out in 2 weeks, so that those kind of updates can go in there. But on Sunday morning, sharing those we're all there anyway, right? All right, let's go to the next table, table 6, the final one here. What are our strengths and weaknesses in creating a place of becoming for people outside our community of faith?
We had the easiest question.
Yeah, totally.
So we felt like we kind of got dripped on this question. Because you can't really disciple people outside of the community of faith until they're somehow affiliated with the community of faith. So we're actually dependent on all of your answers to be able to make that contact and be able to start reaching out. We came up with the stock answer of prayer, because prayer is the one thing that we can be doing to try to bring that community of faith some sort of growth. And then we talked about maybe we need opportunities for corporate prayer outside of service. For a while we had a sign out there, we were doing corporate prayer for Ukraine, but that was something that actually brought people into the church that weren't part of the church. And, maybe we need more of an active prayer community. We also talked about community events at church that have happened in the past and keep going on, but the chicken pie supper, there used to be community potlucks here, we used to have a talent show. And that's other ways to, you know, get people from outside of the community into our community. We also talked about other choices for worship, not on Sunday, advertising. And, you know, the concept of having when new people come in, having someone to walk alongside them and really cement them into our community.
Yeah, that's great. Feedback, response?
So on that last note, isn't that what we're all supposed to do? I mean,
What's that?
cement a relationship with a new person. I mean, how do you figure out who's the person to do that? That can't be, like Mark said, it can't be an assignment, because it's not genuine.
I think if you're talking to them, you get a feel for maybe their interests, if you know what other people are doing, or, you know, you might say, oh, well, you've got young kids who are out with you today, you send them to Laura.
I already do that, so.
Yeah, so you do that naturally.
I just,
You know the people, you kind of bring them to, other people who they can share things with. That's an innate ability that you have.
no, it's
I
just
would-
because I'm old, that's all, just because I'm in here forever and.
I think it's important to point out that the church is not one human being, behaving identically times 100, right, or so,
Correct.
whatever. The church is a collection of people with different gifts, different strengths. Becky, your gift is hospitality. That's one of them, and you may have others. Some people have gifts of teaching, some people have gifts of administration. Some people have gifts of just emotional, you know, empathy. We have different kinds of people here with different gifts, and the church is supposed to be a synthetic combination of all of these kinds of people.
Amen. Yep. Anybody else want to respond to that? Creating a place of becoming for people outside our community of faith? One of the things that I think of in this particular one was, and I told them this question was immediately, or was intentionally, or is intended to raise the questions, what do we need in order to become that kind of place? I think, I love how you guys hit on prayer, and corporate, even more opportunities for prayer. But I think in that particular situation, there's a big opportunity for the individuals. How do I say this? Tell a story. I was a freshman at college. I declared a business management degree. I was headed that direction. And one of the campus security guards, they all rode, it was down in Florida, so everybody drove in golf carts. He came, and I was sitting on a bench, and I had my Bible open. And he pulled over, and he kind of like squealed into a stop. Never met this guy before. And he said, hey, what are you reading? I said, well, I'm actually, I was reading something in the book of Malachi. And he says, oh, that's interesting. And he starts talking to me about the book of Malachi. And he says, you know, we get together and we talk about this if you ever want to come, and we talk about this kinds of things. And there was something in that initial interaction that my heart was drawn towards being a better person, you might say. Or actually, my heart was drawn towards, I really want to know God in the way like this guy. Just a quick little glimpse, but I want to be something like that, you know? That was like straight out of Acts, except it was Philip and the Ethiopian eunuch going by on a chariot, you know? And the Spirit didn't whisk this guy away. He whisked away in his golf cart afterwards. But there was something about, I was an outsider. I wasn't in his group. But he approached me in such a way that I kind of had a feeling of, I want to become more. Something about him and the way he just interacted with me is drawing me to become more than just what I am. And that's a real powerful dynamic. Imagine if there was like, I don't know, 3 of us in our church who just said, yeah, I feel like I can be that. I can ask those stimulating conversations while I'm walking about, and then have something on the back end, because the church community together has developed this, maybe it's like an alpha course or a group for people who are just exploring things. I have that, so I can invite them to come with me to that, but I really want to live on that edge of between the church and the world, but still representing the kingdom of God. Yeah.
That story is important in a lot of ways. One of the things that strikes me about the story is that this person who encountered you was not the president of the college.
Mm-mm.
He was not a professor.
No.
Right? He was not the CFO. You said he's campus security, driving a golf cart?
Yep.
But God uses anyone whose heart is open to him
Yep.
in divine ways.
Yep.
God does not see us the way the world sees us, and we should see each other the way
Yeah.
the world
Yeah.
assigns value.
Yeah. Well, and that's the whole idea of telos, right? That God sees us differently. And what if we approached each other and looked at each other the way God looks at us? And that's what that guy did in that moment. He didn't see me what I was. He saw what the Lord was potentially doing in my life. And he almost like called that out of me in a very subtle, like conversational way. Jim?
Well, the other thing that struck me about that story is that he is not afraid to share his faith with you. He didn't know who you were, whether
Yeah.
you were going to laugh at him or whatever.
Yeah.
You might have been reading some smut novel. Who
Yeah,
knows?
exactly. Yeah.
And so.
In a leather cover.
What he
Okay.
was personifying
Yeah.
is the Dartmouth College motto, which is Vox Clamantis Miserta, a voice crying in the wilderness. I think that's what God wants us all to do.
Mm.
You gotta go out there and put it out there and let people know what you believe, even if you might feel a little uncomfortable. It's like, well, here's what we believe, here's what we do, not in a way that's gonna, shove it down their throat, but just being honest and direct about, in this, we are living in a desert in a lot of ways.
Mm.
And we need to be that voice in the desert.
Yeah. I saw a hand over here.
Well, the other piece of that is, so I agree with both of you, and the other piece of it is that the guy knew full well that you could have blown him off, or you could have maybe been polite, but still blown him off.
He had a quick exit strategy, just like
Good point, but I mean, the point is that any one of us, particularly somebody like me, could immediately analyze the situation and say, I'm not gonna do this, because the opportunity, the risk versus the benefit in terms of my success are low.
Yeah.
But it's not, he's actually internalized that message, that it's not about, A, it's not about your success.
Yeah.
And B, it's not your responsibility what happens next
Yeah.
after you do the part that you're feeling called to do.
Yeah.
That part doesn't belong to you.
Someone preached a sermon recently on sowing seeds.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Right, Eric? Yeah. Yeah, Tom.
The campus security, gentleman, I thought modeled the coming alongside that I strongly believe in. He saw you, he saw an opportunity, he saw a leather-bound book, the odds were in his favor. He was willing to step up and make that first gentle question. That first gentle question wasn't, do you believe?
Yeah.
It was, what are you reading?
Yeah.
If your answer was, I'm reading,
Smut.
smut, maybe you go, maybe
Yeah.
God bless you.
Yeah.
But it wasn't. So
Yeah.
he initiated a process that, and you took the next step. And
Mhm.
so, we're talking about this combined church. I find myself thinking a lot about this church, and I'm excited by its confluence of factors. I'm drawn to its historicity. It's been here a long time. That's cool. It is in a place that was founded by Christian exiles from other places. Universities were set up to train pastors to God. They have lost their way. We have become from the most religiously focused region in the country, and to the least, which has been mentioned here. That excites me. We're in the midst of Missionary Central, which is from when we were kids. Who would have thought? I love what the Anglican Church. I love the fact that the Africans are the ones that are holding them to biblical truths. The historicity, the connection in a small rural environment is cool, but there's also this sense of vibrancy and reality vibrancy through the college and the medical center. And those combination of things with this foundation of hospitality and biblical truth, that's an exciting combination. Now, what we do with it is what is the point of this morning, but And we've been blessed with something really special.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a nice podcast.
Yeah, it is a good podcast. Someone should do that. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, David.
So to me, one of the great portions of your sermons is when you ask for those that would like to be prayed for, sickness or surgeries or tough times in their lives. That's a great way for the community to kind of come together and all that. And I don't know if this is really a thing, but I also think this would be a great way for the community, the group, maybe to show gratitude communally, would be to have a moment where you share where we think that God answered our prayers or heard us, or, hey, a guy pulled up to me in a golf cart and I had this conversation really quickly so we could celebrate that. Or I've gone through this time in my life and I've been praying and I feel like God answered me by doing this.
Yeah.
And that's a bit the corollary, the opposite of the other portion, where we're
Yeah.
celebrating where He heard us.
Yeah.
And I've also often thought, hey, I'd like to know.
What happened with that?
What's that?
What happened with that thing we were praying
What
for?
happened with that, or,
Yeah.
what's going on in someone else's life where they can be appreciative and particularly thankful, we're all thankful for what we have here, but I think God answered me.
Yeah.
I think He heard me here.
Yeah.
And celebrate that quickly in the
Yeah.
sermons.
Yeah. I like that. I like that a lot. Yeah.
I wanted to share something that I totally forgot, and I did tell Laura, I don't know if she told Kevin, but that goes along with this belong, believe, become. And so I work in a gym, right? And I've met so many people in this community. It's really cool because I get to share, like, my husband's a minister, this is the church, it's really cool. So one day I walked in and this woman comes up to me and she says, Rebecca, I have to tell you, she's a teacher at the Line School, works with special kids in special education, and she said, Rebecca, I have to tell you something that happened this week about Tanner. And I was like, tell me. Tell me. So a lot of what we're talking about downstairs in the kids is, what is our mission in life? Like, what has God called us to do? Not like in 20 years or after college, but today. How can we be a friend to the friendless? How God give us opportunities to show people that you are real and help us in that journey. So I have like harped on this last week, and I don't even know if Tanner knows this, but I was like almost in tears. And she came up to me and she said, Rebecca, I want to tell you something. So we have Lime School is very small, apparently. There's one girl, new girl, I guess in the 8th grade. I'm assuming she's in the 8th grade, and there were these cliques. And there was this group of girls who were not giving her the time of day. And she just was very alone. And this one teacher's kind of standing there at lunchtime or recess, and she's like, oh man, someone go up to her. Because she didn't want to be the one to go up to her and kind of make it like awkward. Yeah. She's like, please, someone. And then there walks Tanner. And he goes right up to her and just befriends her and really takes her under his wing and just like shows her. And maybe he didn't even realize that he was showing the love of Christ, but he was showing the love of Christ. But I just thought it's so encouraging. It was encouraging to me because here we're talking about belong, believe, become to the outside community, but also to the inside of church. And here's a perfect example of how God used an 8th grader in the Lime School, also coming here to reach someone. And I have no idea who this girl was or what kind of impact that made on her life, but I just think of like, we go everywhere in life. God uses us to talk with our neighbors about things, but it doesn't have to be such complex things. God can bring us to people in our everyday lives, at the checkout, and at work, on our walk. So I think it's just like keeping our eyes open to how God is going to use us in those everyday moments, the outside. So I wanted to share that because I thought it's such a great example of how God is using our kids too in the church, and that we should be encouraged as adults.
Yeah. Wow, that's awesome.
Not just the little girl, but the teacher.
Yeah, also, I know, and she's not a believer. She grew up in church, but not really going anywhere. And I've had some really good conversations with her as well at the gym, so it's.
Does she live around here?
She lives in, let's just pray that she, yeah, she lives, just comes over right around, but yeah, she does, we've had great.
I don't want to kibosh conversation. We're not gonna do the third session. Lunch is ready? Yeah, we'll do the third session next year. I gotta stop doing the bonus thing, the thing at the end. We just don't ever come there. But I wanna read you a prayer from Teilhard de Chardin. I think he was French. And I'll close the formal time with this, and then let the conversations continue. But this seems like a good moment to read this. Just to kind of sum up everything that we've talked about today, and who we are, and the unique opportunities we have, and all that. The title of the prayer is called Patient Trust. Above all, trust in the slow work of God. We are quite naturally impatient in everything to reach the end without delay. We should like to skip the intermediate stages. We are impatient of being on the way to something unknown, something new. And yet it is the law of all progress that it is made by passing through some stages of instability, and that it may take a very long time. And so I think it is with you. Your ideas mature gradually. Let them grow. Let them shape themselves without undue haste. Don't try to force them on as though you could be today what time, that is to say, grace and circumstances, acting on your own goodwill, what time will make of you tomorrow. Only God could say what this new spirit, gradually forming within you, will be. Give our Lord the benefit of believing that his hand is leading you, and accept the anxiety of feeling yourself in suspense and incomplete. Let me just pray. Lord, I thank you that you know exactly what we are becoming, what you're calling us to do. And in these talks and in these things, maybe there is a little bit of anxiousness that comes with a feeling of we're not there yet, we're becoming, we don't know what is the next step. Lord, thank you for that anxiety, because that anxiety forces us to trust in you. So Lord, thank you for these conversations today. Thank you for all that you are doing in our church. Thank you for bringing that to light this morning. May we continue to think about these things and talk about these things with each other, to be intentional about that in the course of not only the rest of today and tomorrow, but the course of the next year. Thank you, Lord, that we are becoming something that only you truly see, but you see it perfectly, and we can trust you. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen.